Fifth grade, if you're reading Bridge to Terabithia, you just finished. You need to celebrate and congratulate yourself for finishing that novel. A lot of you have finished several of them since we started this one. If you did not read Bridge to Terabithia, I'm pretty confident that you are done with the book you were going through as well. So you need to congratulate yourself for that too. It's a great accomplishment.
If you did not read Bridge to Terabithia and you were reading a different book instead, I would recommend that you go ahead and pause this video and go watch the chapter 13 read along of Bridge to Terabithia. I think it'll help you be able to keep up with this lesson a little bit more, and I think you'll get a lot more out of it. So now,
we're going to finish our book up with two concepts. The first concept is resolution. Remember when we did our plot diagram, resolution is the opposite of conflict. The conflict was the problem. And in any good story, there are several conflicts all throughout the book. Let's take a look at some of them.
Go ahead and take your skills journal out, go back to literary elements, and go to the next available blank page under literary elements. We're going to take some notes, and I'd like you to do that, but I trust that you're gonna do it. You do not have to take a picture and submit any of this to me. Just make sure yours looks like mine, and I trust you that it will. If you're having trouble keeping up with the notes, I'm gonna have them here on the screen, and you can still come back and refer to this video anytime, even after fifth grade.
In your next available blank page under literary elements, I want you to make a T-chart and label one side conflict and the other side resolved. You can pause this video while you do that. Let's take a look at some of the conflicts. We'll start with the first one that we talked about way at the beginning of the book. Just wanted to be the fastest. Now, if you did not read Bridge to Terabithia and you read your own book, yours is not going to look like mine, and you're probably going to have to ask a parent for some help with this. But hopefully the concept will help you out here, and the examples we're giving you will help you out. Just wanted to be the fastest runner in the fifth grade. So that'll be our first conflict. Now, sadly, after Leslie wound up dying, he did become the fastest, but that certainly didn't make him happy. So we're not going to say that that is how the resolution occurred. Think way at the end of the book,
when Jess decides that there is a relationship he has that's more important than being the fastest. Do you remember? Maybelle, he decided that his sister was more important than being the fastest. Again, if you went through a different book than Bridge to Terabithia, this chapter you're gonna have to ask a parent maybe for some help to think about how the conflicts of your characters were resolved. These examples will probably be helpful for you anyway, though. Let's think of another conflict that Jess had to deal with. What was his really big conflict that we heard about all through the book? This is an internal conflict, a fear he had. Right, he was afraid of drowning or of water, but he had this internal conflict because he didn't like feeling like a coward.
What I took here was Jess was afraid of being underwater, but he didn't want to be, let's say want to feel like a coward. Want to feel like a coward. And what do we call this kind of conflict? If he's only in a conflict with himself, he's not in an argument with somebody else, he is only in a conflict with himself. Internal conflict, correct. So think about the end of the book. How did Jess resolve this conflict? That he's afraid of being underwater. Did he go underwater? Do we find that out in the book? We don't. So how was it resolved? Did he feel like a coward at the end? Well, Did he admit that he was scared? He sure did. He admitted that he was scared when Maybelle was about to fall, but he did it anyway. He chose to be brave for her. So he conquered his fear in order to help Maybelle. So that's how we're going to resolve that conflict. Jess let's say faced his fear to rescue Maybelle.
Now let's think about the other conflict that we brought up in the introduction of your plot diagram. We said he wanted to be the fastest. We also said that he was alone. He really had no one. And then we thought the conflict was resolved because Leslie was here. And then we lost Leslie. And then he was alone again. So let's go ahead and write the conflict.
Right, Jess was alone. I think this is number 3.
Think about how that conflict was resolved. We wanted it to be Leslie, and it was for a while. She changed him a lot. But after she died, there were other people that he was able to develop relationships with. Think about them. Monster Mouth Myers, even. I don't know how close they wound up getting. We can only make predictions about that. But he did get some insight to her. He learned about her, and they agreed that they were going to help each other through their grief that they each had had. So there's Miss Myers. And remember Maybelle, he always loved her. Of all the sisters, she was the one he could put up with the most. But they weren't close at the beginning. And by the end, they had really developed a strong relationship. And then, of course, Dad. But we're going to make a whole different one out of that one. So for now, let's say that he was able to develop relationships.
Again, the conflict was he started out alone. Jess was alone. And then it was resolved because he developed... I ran out of room. Sorry. He developed relationships. You can even put little dots here. Maybelle. Miss Myers. Dad. Maybe even Janice Avery, but we don't have enough text evidence to throw her in. So about Dad, that was a whole conflict in of itself. Let's make that number 4. And I know I wasn't numbering them. You can go back and number them if you want, or you can just start from here. Jess didn't feel loved by his dad.
How did the author resolve that conflict? Dad hugged him, right? He picked him up and held him like a baby and soothed him and he comforted him. So even Dad was there for him in his grief.
So we're going to write that. His dad comforted him when Leslie died.
I thought of another one that also involves Dad. Jess wanted to be an artist, but whenever Dad came around, Jess hid all of his art supplies because he was afraid that Dad was going to judge him. And he's right about that. Dad was not kind or accepting about Jess's hobby of art. But in the end, remember when Jess freaked out and he threw all of his art supplies into the water, who was it that said, well, that was a darn fool thing to do? It was his dad. He wasn't actually trying to yell at Jess or reprimand him. He was actually saying, inferring that he knew Jess really loved art and he needed his art to be able to express his feelings. I didn't write that one down because we've already covered the relationship between Jess and his dad. Let's think of another. What about the conflict or problem of Jess having no imagination? Remember, he said he needed Leslie to make the magic of Terabithia work. He said he needed Leslie because the words never came to him.
Added another conflict. Jess had no imagination. How was that resolved?
It was resolved in that scene where I was choking back tears trying to read to you, where he was introducing Maybelle to Terabithia, and he used all those beautiful words. Leslie taught him that, right? And then he was able to teach Maybelle.
Wonder how that conflict was resolved. Leslie taught him how to use his imagination.
And now it's your turn. I want you to give me 3 examples of conflicts and how they were resolved. Try to find examples besides the ones I gave you. You can just list them or number them 1 through 3, or you can put them in a T-chart like what I showed you. Be creative. Now, speaking of resolution, go grab your plot diagram and then come back. Okay, if you're watching, you've got your plot diagram right in front of you. Let's review it before you turn it in.
At the beginning of the book, when we first started this plot diagram, we introduced a character, Jess, and his main conflict, we decided there were 2 at the beginning. Jess wanted to be fastest, and he was alone. He didn't have anyone. So that was our first conflict before we started talking about his fears.
We decided that that conflict has been resolved now at the end of the book. How? Think about which relationships he decided to make more important than being fastest. The first relationship he decided to make more important than being fastest was Leslie Burke. She won, and he was really mad at first, but he decided to get over it. He wanted to be her friend. So he put his relationship with Leslie over being fast. Then at the end, who else did he put over being the fastest person? What relationship did he decide was more important than being the fastest? We talked about it earlier. Maybelle, right? So he decided that relationships were more important than being the fastest in the 5th grade. Let's write that down.
This really resolves both of the conflicts that we introduced at the beginning of this diagram. That he was alone, well, now he has relationships. Jess developed relationships. And that he wanted to be fastest was resolved with the second half of the sentence, and decided that relationships were more important than being fastest. So now we have a conflict, we have a resolution. One more thing. Let's talk about what happened up here at the top.
When we read Tuck Everlasting, we had a fun little debate one day. Remember when we were deciding what might be the climax? At first, we were sure the climax when May Tuck hit the man in yellow in the back of the head. Then we thought, okay, maybe because he died, maybe that was the climax. And then we thought, maybe her going to jail and keeping the secret, maybe that was the climax. Sometimes in a book, and a lot of times in a movie, it draws out a little bit. It's not clear cut. So there's not going to be a clear cut right or wrong answer in the climax of the story. You just need to keep in mind that it's the most exciting part, that it's the turning point, and it's when the main character comes face to face with his conflict. Well, it seems like one part of the climax we all agree on. Leslie died. If that's all you wrote, that's okay. But think of another really exciting part. A part where Jess had to come face to face with his own conflicts. Being alone, having relationships, maybe not necessarily being the fastest, but the big problem of his fear of the water. What other part was really like suspenseful? I'm thinking of the time when Maybelle was stranded or stuck, and he suddenly had to come face to face with the fact that he didn't have Leslie there to help. He didn't have anybody there to help, and he had to be brave and help his sister. So you might want to add on to the climax of the story by saying,
Climax, Leslie died and Jess had to save Maybelle. If you didn't, and you used the scene about Jess and Maybelle as a falling action towards resolving the conflict, that's okay.
So go ahead and look over your plot one last time. Polish it up, make it look nice and neat, decorate it, whatever you want to do with it. And go ahead and submit that, get it turned in if you haven't already. It's due on May 22nd. Your other assignment this week is also for chapter 13. So don't forget to watch the other video.